Our next panel is actually a caregiving roundtable, which I'm super excited about. I think this is our first time hosting a roundtable discussion. And we'll be talking about caregiving and navigating this next, months when it comes to caregiving, redesigning, caregiving for the future. So I'm super excited about this conversation as we approach caregiving in the new normal. Thank you, Jada, for joining us. So
thank you for having me.
I don't want to steal your thunder, so I want you to have the opportunity to introduce yourself to the audience. But thank you so much for joining us. I am looking forward to this wonderful, wonderful conversation with the three amazing panelists that you have.
Yes, we have an amazing group of women that I cannot wait to meet. Thank you, everyone who is attending right now. If you are just now tuning in, thank you for joining. We have an amazing hour that we are going to discuss during our childcare roundtable. But first, I'd love to introduce myself. My name is Jada Rashawn Pickett. I'm a professional nanny consultant, Sitter City spokesperson, and the founder of the Nanny Niche, which is an online community that is dedicated to helping professional nannies expand their careers and develop personal brands online. Today, our guests that are going to be joining us will be Genevieve Thiers, which is our lovely rock star founder of Sitter City. We also have Patrice Martin, the founder of the Holding Co. And we have Priya Krishnan, Senior Vice President of Bright Horizons. This is going to be a great conversation that we're going to have with everyone, and I look forward to starting. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Morning.
Thank you guys for joining today. I am really excited personally just to speak with you and talk about motherhood and professionalism and working. So without further ado, I'd love to jump right into the first discussion and really just kind of ask you guys, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And what are some of the childcare challenges that you guys have been experiencing? And also, if you know people who have been experiencing some of the similar challenges as well as parents. Patrice, we can start with you.
Sure, happy to start, and thanks so much for having me this morning. I think that I have two young kids, a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. This has absolutely not been an easy time for anyone, but I think we're just now, everyone seems to be at their breaking point, and have so much respect for the parents across the country who are enduring this. And we have all here so many different facets of this story, and how many women have left the workforce because of the incredible burden that's being put on families at this moment in time. And I don't personally have any the solutions are just, I feel like every family is just doing the best they can and making it through. And I just essentially want to put out a feeling of solidarity to all of the parents who are out there just doing their best every day.
Love that. So true. Genevieve, what about you? How are you? And what are some of the childcare challenges you've witnessed and experienced for yourself?
Well, hi.
Hi.
You might hear my kids in the background. That's how we're doing.
Mom life.
Yes. Here we are. Right. No, I would say that I, as of course, this founder of Sitter City, and I love the service. I've had a sort of intergalactic fleet of childcare, since my twins, who are now 9, were just born. But we lost our nanny earlier this year. We just tried through the pandemic to keep her, but we realized it was going to be a year or more. We have an elder in the household with Alzheimer's that we're dealing with, and we're just trying to make it work. We've had at any different point bubbles with family that we've opened, but then have had to be closed due to exposure. And it's really hard to do all this without any help. I will say that everything except for a few board meetings and mentorship calls has been shunted for me to the side. Also, my kids have special needs. They're lightly on the spectrum. So we need to have high levels of routine for them every day. I'm basically homeschooling. So I love it. I've never felt
Yeah.
closer to my kids, but this is a more than full-time job. And I've never felt so overwhelmed, so alone. I mean, what do you do when work is impossible, but losing work is even more
Yeah.
impossible? This is a really bad situation, and women are taking a step back that it's going to take us decades to recover from right now.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, and we want to dive more into that too. But first, Priya, I want to hear from you too. What have you been seeing, and just working with Bright Horizons too? What are some of the challenges that you've been hearing? Welcome, by the way. You look beautiful. You guys all do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's almost like a moment of collective feeling of lightness when you hear it's a shared experience. I moved
Yes.
in the middle of the pandemic. So in the middle of all of this, we moved from India to the US. It's been an interesting experience, shifting schools for the children as they've started school, having them uh, doing this remotely. But what's kept us going is really a collective sense of humor. We laugh about the days that don't go well. And we have learned to just talk to each other. Is it an easy experience? It isn't. But I think talking about it and having a safe space for the boys, and mine are slightly older than Patrice's, they're 13 and 16, just for them to have that avenue to sort of say, I haven't had a great day, and I hate not kicking a ball outside, is really, really critical. And to Patrice's point, I think there is a call out for solidarity. It is at the moment, I think we're all socially distanced, but going through such an incredible shared experience that sometimes taking solace in that collective misery is a notion that we should stick on to.
That is so true. The one thing that stood out to me is that this has been a very hard time for moms, for parents in general, and everyone who's tuning in and watching. I know that you guys can relate to what we're discussing right now, but just so that we can put some actual numbers to really put things into perspective, 5.4 million women were forced out of the workforce. 5.4 million. I don't think that I even put that into perspective. And then the women who stayed, they were reduced, their job positions were reduced to part-time. And there were just a lot more challenges in that space that they were enduring. So can we talk a little bit about that relatability and what you guys have seen in the workforce as that pertains to it? And what are the conversations being had in your communities in regards to this? Genevieve.
Yes. Well, America has no social safety net. This has been a problem for the longest time. We rely on women to step in and to cover the damages when something like happens, and we've all seen the horrific numbers. I feel like I'm screaming into a void. I have been tweeting them, Facebooking. I mean, I just cannot thank you enough for holding this beautiful conference. I just do not see anyone talking about this information. And so I think for me, the worst part is that, I mean, we all know women are not equal, but how for granted everyone still takes the fact that we will step in and just cover everything. And this is not identity politics. It's just a simple understanding of our situation. Back when I was founding Sitter City in those first, 10 years where I was, kind of building it up to be something that moms were using, I wrote a book. It was called Love at First Sit. And I remember it was very eye-opening for me to write this book. Before the war, World War I, World War II, women were just expected to care for children with no money at all. It was just your job. Literally, if you were somewhere and you were a man, you would hand the children off to any woman because that was her job, to take care of the children, right? Then the wars happened and women were able to work in the factories. Once they were able to work, we actually ended up, coming out of the wars, understanding our work had value. And so we asked for pay. And for many decades, America has been a bit furious about this. There's a reason that in the 80s and 90s, babysitters are being killed, and all these movies like the sitter running for her life. Men particularly have never really gotten comfortable with the fact that women are now asking for what we're worth. And the worst part is that we're only here. We have so much further to go. We just got a woman in the White House. You know, it's very, very alarming to me that this is happening. I think it will take decades to recover. And, you know, my metric for success for any conference or discussion is how many men are here today? Because, you know, we can work on getting women into positions of power. I think that's the answer to dealing with these horrible job losses and how much we're set back. But how many men are even here today listening to us? I can't get women to listen, much less men, when I'm out there talking about it.
That is so good. What a great point. I want to talk more about that in a second too. Thank you, Genevieve. Priya, can you talk to us about that too? What are some of the conversations being had in our communities? Obviously now we're all working a lot more virtually. Do you think that the conversations have been minimized and women have been more silenced, parents in general?
So, you know, and given you shared the statistics, it was interesting for me just to watch the fact that, you know, for the first time, I think before the pandemic hit, there were more women employed in the US than men. And now we've sort of gotten set back to the 1980s, right? There's a part of me which is, you know, I'm a glass half full sort of person. So the hope that I have out of this discussion is that, you know, what has come out of the pandemic is suddenly everyone's realized the household burden on women. You know, employers have started seeing how much of this is being taken on by women. So when you have children running out and around in your Zoom calls, or you're cooking, you're being mom, you're being teacher, you're being carer for the elderly at home, this has suddenly gained main stage, right? So while there has been this drop from the workforce, I also feel, you know, the three constituents in this discussion are the woman herself, her seeking support and saying, how do I get help? The second is, you know, employers, you know, because so much of what employers, what is their responsibility and where does, you know, given if the woman has to be productive at home, does she require different support structures in the workplace? And then the third is the government. So how do we collectively mobilize that work, you know, that energy to say, is there a mechanism not to go through another 30 years to get to the place where there are more women hired? And can we fast cycle that? So I think that would be my forward. Is it disappointing? Yes, it is. But I've always had the worldview of saying, what are we going to do about it? And hence, you know, the seems like a move forward. And Genevieve, it's nice to see your children in the background.
Real life here. We celebrate it.
Like an interview. I was like,
Patrice, can you speak to that a little bit too? You know, I really love to hear from moms and what that conversation is like. I don't think you guys get that opportunity enough.
Yeah, I'll start with before COVID. We actually led a year-long exploration on this, just understanding care in the US, and had the chance to talk to many different families across the country. And it was like human conversations, just like, what's the reality of life like now with work and kids and taking care of our aging relatives. And one of the things that we saw in that work, like when we asked moms in particular, what would you do with an extra half hour? They often said to us, I'd sit alone in the dark. You know, it was a very depressing finding, you know, where we were already strapped. We were already pushed so thin before this pandemic. And the pandemic has just revealed that we have no safety net, we have no structure. We're looking at this as an individual family responsibility, and it's now it's just too much. You know, we were already operating on razor thin margins to put all of these things together, and now it's just been exposed that this is really an impossible situation. But I will say that I share some of Priya's optimism in that I think it's actually giving us the attention that this is a crisis that needs to be solved. And we're seeing things bubble up like Procter and Gamble put out an ad like "Close the Chore Gap," which is just to get into like the narrative shift that we need in this country around whose job caregiving is. It's everybody's job. It needs to be a collective responsibility. We saw I was really inspired by Girls Who Code, who put out that full page ad in the New York Times, calling for a Marshall Plan for moms. And we need to be recognizing this unpaid labor. Let's do bold things. So I do think that there's more energy and more attention to the fact that we cannot ignore this anymore. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that gives me hope around how this
I love that. I love that. And as leading ladies in the industry, how are you guys emphasizing the crisis, but also taking the opportunity to really make noise about this situation and kind of change things and make things better? Have you guys become better leaders, more empathetic as moms and to moms? Do you implement more of the motherly side with your team and understanding? And how do you think employers should go about just kind of extending some more grace to their staff, specifically parents? Let's do, Priya, let's start with you.
Sure. So, I mean, I ran a childcare business before I joined Bright Horizons. So the space is really, I used to say it wasn't a feminist movement, but it is. It is about providing, support to women who choose to continue to work, and it's a personal choice. And how do you create support structures? There was a interesting McKinsey article, and also with all the employers we talked to, I feel a lot of them through the pandemic have gone through the exercise of saying, how do we support parents and what are the tools? And flexibility has been one of those that they've said, let's allow flexibility in the workforce. While that's a great tool for a parent, even today, I know if I wanted to work 4 hours, I would have the ability to do it, and Bright Horizons would support me. But the reality is we are conscientious workers and we have a work day. And so how do you enable women to say, it is okay for you to take a step back and say, I actually do need the time off? So the point that Sandra was making earlier in terms of saying, create that space for yourself. I think one of the pieces I've actively worked on is just telling people, think about how do you, one, thank yourself, hold yourself to a lower standard. And, if you had OCD around the kitchen, let it be. If you had OCD around getting homework done, let that go. But by the same measure, if things feel a little overwhelming at work, take the step back and ask for support. I think as women leaders, just even sending that message of saying, I struggle and I need the time off. And if I don't lead by example, I'm not sure whether women who work with us will necessarily take that step. So I just think we need to be collectively conscious about saying it's okay to do it.
I love that. Genevieve, do you have anything to add to that? I'd love to hear from you too.
Sure. Well, my own approach to everything in terms of leadership has been a little bit different, just because, once I left Sitter City, I've actually been singing opera around the world. So, what I've decided to do and what I have done, and I don't think I've mentioned this a lot, I've put over $1 million so far into women, and I'm not stopping there, but I've put over $1 million into women to date. And where has all this gone? Well, $500,000 of it has gone into women in tech. So it's really
awesome.
Not easy being a woman in tech. I've invested in over 15 women-run tech companies to date, anywhere from 25,000 to 250,000. And that has been because I just wanted to signal to the venture capital world, which is still overwhelmingly male, these women have something. Back when I was creating Sitter City, I actually got into a bunch of rooms with guys who said, my wife handles that. It's a babysitters club. They thought it was like a problem women should go off and solve in a room somewhere. This is just 20 years ago. So it was pretty amazing to me, when this $1 billion industry, right, took so long to create. I mean, and of course we're very successful now and the whole industry is created, but that's been hard. So I would say that's the first place I've been putting my money into women to make more leaders. The second place is in politics. I've been helping women. For example, I just raised this past year over $20,000 for Lauren Underwood, who is in Congress now. we cannot do enough to get women into office, to get women elevated. I've put over 80,000 into women actually in politics, any race. I mean, it could be school board, it could be Congress, but that's one of the bigger one of the more influential women that I've helped. Lucy McBath, Marie Newman. I mean, we just have to keep pushing. A third place I've been putting my funds, my grants, whatever you call it, is
support.
Like, yes, I mean, we really have to. So I was able to make, my way with Sitter City, and I have turned around and giving back because we have to. It's such a bad situation. So the third organization or type that I give to is nonprofit organizations promoting women. For example, Vote Mama. Luba Gretchen Shirley ran for Congress a few years ago, and she did not win her race, but she successfully argued for women and won a case for women to be able to use congressional campaign funds in a race for childcare.
Mm-hmm.
You believe that we couldn't use that? So now she has an organization, Vote Mama, that's fighting this over the line state by state. So this is my own version of giving back and leadership.
I love it, Genevieve. Thank you for that. Those are really great 3 ways that you've been contributing, and we need more of that too. I love that. Patrice, can you close this question out with any input in that as well on how you are speaking to that and supporting that as well?
Yeah, happy to. One point I'd love to make at the large frame around employers is thinking about how we encourage men to take leave in this space as well, like to actually focus on parents as both genders, as we've seen when men take paid family leave. That's so much better for women's leadership because women are not the only ones who have that moment of stepping back. It becomes normalized, and so how do we make sure that we're doing that in our inside our organizations, inside our cultures now, so that this burden gets shared, and then we're all distributing the hit on our careers. For me personally, we started the Holding Co. as a lab to redesign care for the 21st century. We started in March, right at the beginning of the pandemic, which is a crazy time to launch something.
Couldn't have predicted it.
But also it's been amazing to be working on care in this moment, and that feels like a privilege. We have a small team. There's 11 of us, but 3 of which are part-time roles to create real flexibility for the ways in which we could get very senior women who have young kids in this moment to be able to work with us, and that's been exciting. We do on Fridays no meetings after 1:30, just to give everybody a little bit more spaciousness. We really try to hold the values of building the work care integration that we're trying to create out in the world within our team, which is it's something that I think just needs like real honesty, communication, vulnerability, and recognize that's easier to do with a team of 11 folks, but absolutely something that we intend to model.
Oh, so good. You guys, there are so many questions. Like, this is such a really good conversation. We need to extend it, but we've just got a little bit under 10 minutes. We have a couple questions coming in from the audience, and I do want to touch on those, and we will, but I do want to switch really quickly. I want to talk quickly about just how people of color have been impacted in this industry. And actually, it was reported in December of 2020, last year, that 156,000 jobs that were lost by women accounted for actually Latinas and Blacks accounted for all of those jobs that were lost. So my question to you guys, and you can chime in as you please, is how are you guys uplifting and supporting women of color in these times? Genevieve, I'm picking on you just because there's no the order. So.
No, I would say that I have deliberately been looking for women of color to promote, and I believe that we all should be. I remember when the Black Lives Matter protests happened this year, I reached out to friends from high school and said, I never knew, and at that point forwards, I made a personal vow that I was just going to buy as much as possible from Black colleagues and friends that I did not even understand their situation. So, there is a reason that the most I've raised politically has been for candidates like Lauren Underwood and Lucy McBath. I actually was, I believed in Kamala from the beginning. She was my top choice. I was at her opening event before, she moved into the VP slot, and I was a max out donor, so, rooting for, specifically for women of color is very critical right now. I would also say in my business grants and my tech grants, it always bothered me that I believe across 20 entrepreneurs, there's 3 Latinx and 3 Black women. And that bothered me. It's not as diverse as I'd like it to be. So at 1871 here in Chicago, which is a business tech hub, we just launched an accelerator program for Black female entrepreneurs. So this kind of thing, it's like the next wave of what we're dealing with, and we've got to focus on it, because we as women are divided, and until we fix those divisions internally, we'll never be able to act as a unit to get a woman in the White House, not in the VP
100%. 100%.
My goal in life.
Yes. Priya, how about you?
So I think, the question around supports, I'll raise that again, is one is committing to saying we will hire more equitably, whether it's gender or race. The second is what are the needs that are different for, women of color, women in general. I don't want to be a man. I am a feminist, but I embrace my feminism, right? So I love the fact that I'm a woman, but my needs are slightly different in terms of, and my responsibilities are slightly different. When I have a child, I have a very hands-on husband, but in the early years, I had to be around, from a caregiving standpoint. When we had elders, it was my choice. So, and am I valuable in the workforce? Absolutely. So how does, again, and, what were the supports that I needed, and how does my employer think about it is critical. So while I've seen a lot of positive momentum in terms of people saying we want to hire, where is the pipeline, and how do you actively work right from the beginning to say, do we get more women of color into schools, into colleges, and how do we support them through that journey so that they're making their way to the top? So one is a commitment, but second is thinking through the data, where are the fall-offs taking place, and how do we societally, and then as organizations, think about creating support structures at those points.
I love it. I love it. Really quickly, Patrice, before we take to the audience,
Sure.
Do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, I'll just say that in October, we put out this list called the Care 100, which was really an opportunity to say, as we bring more attention to the fact that care needs to be redesigned and reimagined, who's at the forefront of doing that? And it was a list that celebrated, I can't remember the exact stat, but I think we had close to 50% people of color across the list, and we did it in a really cross-sector way to be able to say, like, these are, when we think about those who are the entrepreneurs, the investors, the artists, the activists, the we had a woman who has been a daycare provider for 30 years in Chicago, like who is doing this and showing us what the future of care can look like, and really wanted to kind of speak the values of kind of recognizing those who have not necessarily been celebrated because of the field of care also being overlooked and unseen. And so that was a contribution that we were really happy to make and want to continue to make.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's really quickly get to some of these awesome questions. So an attendee wants to know if there are any sitter and after school type of fun sessions for older kids, not necessarily that are school or work related, but fun stuff that keeps the kids occupied for at least an hour to an hour and a half. Priya. I see Priya. Whoever would like to
the good thing also about the pandemic has been it's created these models of alternate abilities to engage children, and there's almost been an inflection in terms of adoption of online platforms. There are tons of opportunities there, both from a learning academic standpoint, you have a lot of tutoring options, etc. But on the more fun side, there are camps and there are end of day camps, even virtual visits to museums. And I'm happy to share a list which we can share broadly with the audience. And I'm sure those also differ. So maybe Patrice, you have younger children, and trying to keep a 4-year-old will be occupied slightly different, and then trying to keep a 16-year-old is slightly different. But there are avenues for both sets, and I'm happy to share those with you, Jada.
Those are amazing. We are right at the end of our roundtable, you guys. I do want to go ahead and ask the second and last question for this afternoon, well, actually this morning, and that is, with unemployment where it stands, what would you tell women who are afraid to bring up childcare/parenting issues to their employers during the pandemic for fear of losing only job carrying their households often? So these are potential employers who are afraid to kind of talk about their childcare situations because they're fearing that that might put them at a disadvantage to potentially getting a position. Genevieve?
I don't know, because it truly is a life or death situation. Normally, I'd be like, go for it, tell them, and if they say no, it's not right for you, but you can't. I mean, that's why I say, what do you do when work is impossible, but lack of work is even more impossible? I would only say, go find a woman running for office and put money into her right now. That's our way out. That's our way out. When the women in when Congress, etc., the people making the bills are women.
Priya, what about you? Thank you so much, Genevieve.
I would still say, don't undersell yourself. Talk about the context of how you've operated through this period and how you intend to balance it. But again, within the organization, find other women who can, and it's like Genevieve. I agree. There's no straight answer. In a pre-pandemic scenario, I would have said go for it and ask specifically, saying why can't I bring it up, and these are my needs. But by the same measure, I think being thoughtful about saying why are you relevant to the organization and why childcare is really critical for you. Both of those conversations. And it's not, again, bringing the point back to the shared experience. Any woman who's applying for the job and the commitments organizations are making to hiring women and women of color, potentially there might be an opportunity to get into the mix there. But having the honest conversation is important too.
Great. Patrice, would you like to end this out with an answer before I close it for all of us?
I'll just say I second both of those points. I do think this is a really precarious time and can't put myself in anyone position around how hard that would be to navigate. At the same time, I think there's been a tremendous pull from employee resource groups and the power that parents being in the collection brings to organizations, whether that's just gathering the conversations that are happening or doing it in a more formal way. But it's more like whatever we need to get through at this moment.
That. Thank you guys so much for this conversation. Not enough time in the world to just continue to unpack what we have been enduring. But I would say to everyone who has been watching, thank you for attending. And if I can give you guys some things to go home with from wrapping up our conversation today, that is that we are moving forward in a more positive direction. Let's continue supporting each other, extending empathy and grace to each other from caregivers as well as parents. Thank you guys.